Hey everyone, so chapter 2 in this brand new series on creating jungle in Cubase 12 Pro. If you missed the first one, you can go back again and check it out. This one we're looking at sub bass and bass. So we're looking at creating a sub bass from scratch like we used to on the Akai S950. We're going to show some of that as well, and how we did it on the S950 and how you can do it in Cubase 12 Pro. We're going to be looking at layering the bass, processing the bass, getting it fat. We're even going to incorporate one of our VSTs, our amazing VSTs, Padshop, just to create a nice overall sound as well, to give it some sort of dimensions to the bass, to the sub bass. We're also going to use sample track as well to show you how to do that. So let's get to it. So here we are, chapter 2, and creating jungle sub bass and bass processing as well. This is my track circumference. If you missed chapter 1, have a listen to that. We did the breaks. We're going through the whole track. We're looking at also mixing and mastering and arrangement in chapter 3. But this is chapter 2. We're talking about sub bass, jungle sub bass, bass and bass processing. So here's the sub bass for this track. So you get the idea. This was out of the 950, and it's got some processing and all that kind of stuff as well. We're going to show you how you can do this though, and replicate that hardware's type of jungle sound in Cubase 12 Pro. So before we get to that, I'm going to show you something really cool. So back in the days, 91, 2, 3, 4 onwards in the hardware samplers, specifically the Akai S900, S950, they always came with a test tone program. So from the boot up, you always had a test tone like this. And that's going through the Cubase channel, so you should hear that as well. If you look here, that's what it came with. It just says tone program, and that is a default program, not using up any resources. It just literally is to test the outputs, troubleshoot maybe, to test all the individual outputs and see that everything is working from when you have the unit on. And if I go to transpose, then I can do this. So we're going to go -12. We're going to go -24. And you see where we're going with this now. So this, like, I'm going to start with -12. That's about 1 octave, right? So this is how a lot of jungle sub bass was made. So not just jungle, breakbeat stuff, hardcore. This is what we did because it was just easy to do, you know, and it's almost like you get a free sub bass with your sampler. So it's a cool thing, a cool trick. And a lot of people will still use that now. Coming back to the track, this is that 950, but processed now. So let's show you how you can do that in the box in Cubase 12 Pro using our stock instruments and plugins. So like we said, it was a test tone. So I'm going to go to an audio track. I'm going to show you what that means. If we go to tools, test generator, and I load it up. And there's a test tone. I won't leave it running constantly because I know it can get quite annoying. So the good thing about it is I'll keep it low for now. The good thing we can do now is we can actually have the different shapes. So we can have sine, triangle, square, sawtooth. So obviously this is the same kind of concept. It's for testing, like, you know, if we had Cubase on a PA system and we wanted to make sure people were in key or pitching and all that kind of stuff, or we wanted to check the sound levels. It's a quick thing of firing up Cubase. I might be in a theatre, for instance. I want to test with the sound person. Just give me a quick test of the frequencies, and then I can choose a frequency, a dB level, and I can even choose a frequency range as well. So it's great for testing out things, and even just like white noise, just testing that things are working and stuff. So it's a really useful tool. But in the jungle realm, that's what we're going to be showing you. So obviously I'm keeping it down here for because I don't want to ring your ears off. So here's a test tone. I know what it does. I want to be the sine. I'm going to have it on 0. I'm going to have it on sine. I'm going to have it on 0. I'm going to leave the hertz where they are now, 440. I'm going to leave them exactly where they are. I'm going to close that down. And what I'm going to do then is going to go to the mix console, and I'm going to actually add it to the insert. So mix console, I'm going to add it here on the inserts, and you can see it already here. It's coming through. Obviously, I can monitor it as well. But what I'm going to do is, because I already know which one I already need, I can literally say on this audio track, I'm just going to record. So I'm going to solo everything else out. We already know it's the default setting, you know, on test tone. It's the default on a test generator. It's the default setting. So we're going to go 0 dB. So we get a full level here. 440, we're going to keep it the same. And we're going to do a sine. It's that simple. Don't need to monitor it. I know exactly what it was doing before, how I wanted it, and I just press record. And that'll do. We want a long note so we have more to work with. So there we go. As you can see, it's quite hefty, and you can bring the dB down as well if you want to. It's not a big thing. I can add track here. I'm going to add a sampler track. I'm going to call it sampler sub. There you go. It's sampler sub, and from here I can just literally just drag it into the sampler track, and there's our sub. So really easy to do that same kind of thing. Now, obviously, because it is just a sine wave, it's just a sub, it's not really doing anything else, we can start adding loads of stuff within sampler track. This is what sampler track's really good for. It's really good for actually beefing up sounds, for bass, for vocal chops, sound design. Obviously, we can chop breaks and rearrange them and use the MIDI as well, but for bass, I think it's really, really powerful. So, I'm going to turn our filter on here. I'm going to keep it on tube, low pass 24. I'm going to take the cutoff down a bit more because, I mean, there's not going to be much in there anyway with it being a sine, but if it was the 950, for instance, there's going to be some sort of artifacts if I'm resampling it in, but we're not doing that. But just for this sake, we're going to take it off and leave just the sub frequencies. We don't need anything past 500, up to 500. So there's our sub. I'm going to octave up one more time on this keyboard. So here we can go vintage mode. If we want to be authentic, we're going to go vintage mode. We're going to go 12-bit. Obviously, the bitrate reduction is coming down again. So we're going for this type of sound in Cubase 12 Pro. And then we can actually do now. And so obviously, if you have good neighbors, or you have a sub, or you have good headphones, or just headphones in general, it's probably best to turn them on to get this frequency range, which I'm actually playing here because obviously it's really low. But it's just to show you the sort of sub-bass element that we're doing. And obviously, with it being Cubase, we have great analysis tools and the ability to see exactly what we are doing. And you can see it there. So 50 obviously has to go up the octaves. We also go up the frequency range. So you can see there, it's adding quite a nice bit of heft. So we can go more. So I've got vintage mode on, 12-bit to give us that kind of warm sort of 12-bit lo-fi type of sound. The cutoff's down a bit because obviously we don't need any of this, and it's not going to be there anyway, to be honest, really. But if you want to resample it and layer it and stuff like that, and you still want to keep the sub element, then you can also roll off that stuff, but the cutoff will only do that anyway. So there's our bass hitting between 50 and 100, so that's nice. That's a nice little meaty region. Obviously we can go down the octaves and go even further down if we choose to. Again, if you've got headphones or good neighbors, this is always good to check this out. But you can see it on the analyzer, and this is what I always say is use your eyes as well as your ears. Try and get a combination of both going on so you can actually see what you're doing as well as hear what you're doing. So that's a nice little meaty region, and now I can turn the drive up. And you can see it's imparting harmonics now as well, and this is where the cutoff became quite relevant now. I don't want to go too mad with that. I'm just going to dial it back a little bit. Something like that. And then now I have a sort of sub with a character. So you get the sine wave, and then there's a bit of character, there's a bit of depth in there now, and a bit of drive and a bit of grit. And of course, after that is where the fun bit begins, all the processing. It's up to you where you go with this. What you add, compression, distortion. We have tons of plugins that can process any type of sound. So this is a great starting point. And the reason why I had the longer note is because then we can actually monitor it over a long period of time. But of course, with it being so blocky and sort of full, I mean, it's just a sine wave. If you find it's too much, we can go back to the test generator, and you can actually go back on it again, and you can just take the dBs down. So you can go -20, -9, or -3. So if it's too loud, you can also go back and redo what I've shown you there. So again, the fun bit, which is processing the sub. So here's what I did on this sub after taking out the 950 and doing that whole trick of resampling the test tone. And if I open our edit channel, you can see what I've done here. So again, I call this the fun bit, because it's like making your own signature sub then, your own signature sound, which Jungle is mainly that. It's actually taking things like maybe old break beats and then making them your own, making your own custom signature breakbeat, and it's the same with sub basses. We all have access to the test tone, but how do you make the test tone sound like a fat, meaty sub? Processing. And so this is what we're doing. And the great thing about Cubase, we have tons of plugins to process. I mean, you can go mad with all the slots, but I've got 3 on here, and these work really, really well. On our channel strip, we have things as well. So let's go through them all bit by bit. Quadrafuzz, one of mine and Dom's favourite plugins. We always show this on our shows and stuff like that, on our workshops and demos. Love this plugin. I think it came in Cubase 8.5. Multi-band distortion unit, and it has a mixed parallel knob as well, so it's great to be able to go right across the 2020 spectrum and choose to impart harmonics where you want to see them imparted. More importantly, things can be disabled on and off certain frequency ranges, and you have access to 5 different types of distortion algorithms which you can impart across the whole 2020 spectrum. So it's really, really powerful. And because we're only dealing with the lows, you know, literally only halfway up the spectrum, I've gone for a tape sort of saturation, and I've driven that. And the width is down a bit because we don't really want it to be stereo, and it's not going to be stereo anyway. But that just gives you that security of having things mono under 100 hertz. We can look at that later on in mixing and mastering. And I have some decimation, so it's adding that quite like harmonics, which the drive was adding from the sampler track. And if you listen to it with and without, and you can see it's adding that little bit of extra, and you can really see it in the analyzer. Let's have a look. And that's just me having the mix parallel knob 50%. Obviously, the more I drive it, the more you're going to see all these harmonics start getting added. And it sounds great. So that's going into Destroyer. Really, really cool plugin. Tucked away in Cubase. I think it's a great plugin, this, for kicks, for snares, imparting harmonics and saturation and boosting frequencies, driving stuff as well. For subs, it's amazing. You can choose your frequency range of what you want to focus on. I can choose my boost mode. I can oversample. I can also choose the drive as well. So you can actually zero in on a particular frequency range and then just boost and drive that section. So here we have it here. I've got the output quite high, 8.4, and that's fine because it's jungle, and this is what it was about, driving subs, driving them, pushing things. Obviously not too much, use your ears, but you can get away with it because it's got that kind of analog distortion-y sound. So the boost up by 3.1, the drive's on 4, and let's listen to it with and without. So you hear it, you really hear it, and that's great. Also, we have a mix knob as well. I think the mix knob's a really valuable tool in any plugin world. Basically, it gives you that sort of parallel processing, which back in the days you'd have to create a channel length and a mix end and all that kind of stuff, which is still totally viable. But having it built into the plugin means then I can impart the original signal and then just impart the plug-in process signal with it and mix the taste, and you kind of get the best of both worlds without having to open in other windows and stuff. And I think it's great, especially if you have a ton of plugins. You can actually really mix and blend them to fit without coming out of them windows. So again, with and without. So you really hear that now. You're getting that sort of character, you're getting that kind of distortion and drive, and it's not too much. Obviously, if I boosted it more and I driven it more, and whatever output was left, I pushed that even more, then it would probably start to break up and wouldn't sound too good. But I'm really happy with how that sounds now. And eventually that's going into frequency EQ. And because it was adding quite a bit in there, I've done a little dip there between 50 and 100 just to tame it a little bit, because you can see between 50 and 100 it is quite heavy. Especially the key that I'm playing at as well. So because frequency EQ is really strong, I don't want to use any dynamics on it. I just want to use the power of the equalizer, because it's really strong at cutting, and it's quite instant. You know, it does, when you cut at 4 or 5 or 6 dB, it's really noticeable on this particular EQ. That's why I love frequency EQ. So I've took it down by about 6 dB, And that, all that's doing is just adding a bit more control there, because overall in the mix, pre-master and eventual master, this will be a godsend. It'll save me a lot of headaches. So, and then going across the channel strip, obviously this is our signal flow. We've got some compression. So we've got about a 3.5 threshold and a low ratio, just to take off that boom, 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 just to take off that little bit of that top and control it a little bit more. And we have our auto makeup gain on as well. So going across, we're going to go straight over to the second to last slot. Again, don't forget, with channel strip, it's fully reorderable. That's what I love about channel strip, is that we can actually choose to create our own custom signal chain, our own signal path. So you don't have to use our set ones that we have here, our set modules. So Magneto, love it. Magneto, it's like the TLA that I have over there. It's one of them ones, and I've got one underneath as well, an old valve unit, and it replicates that. It gives you that warm saturation in the bottom end. You can shave off the top so it gets a bit of a darker sound, and then of course you can drive it as well. So it's emulating that sound, and I think this is one of our best plugins. I absolutely love Magneto. So saturation's at 100%. You know, obviously the sub's going to change slightly as you put more saturation in. The sine wave will slightly change. So be careful with how much you're imparting there saturation-wise. But I'm really happy with how I've got it. So let's listen to with and without it. So there you go, saturation at 100. My low frequency, you can choose to dial in where you want the low frequency. High frequency is not really relevant unless there's loads of harmonics going on. I can shave off the high frequencies, but not really needed. If you need to see a full version of Magneto and see exactly what it does, and obviously our lovely user interface, you can just open up the full one as a plugin, and you can see it here. It's the same thing. It's doing exactly the same thing, but you get to see it more in depth. You get to see the VU meters, the amount of saturation. We have dual mode, so it has like 2 tape units because it's emulating tape. And then obviously the same knobs that we can see here as well. And also you can solo, which is great. So that's Magneto, and I think on sub basses, it really does add that type of sound that you need. So now we have our sub bass, we want to layer it. So a big trick back in the days, I know I keep saying back in the days, but this is what it was. It literally was over 25 years ago that I started doing this, 1994. But we always used to layer a sub bass with a sound to create your own. My particular thing to do was like use the Access Virus or the CS2X, or the CS1X even as well, the Yamaha CS1X and CS2X, and sometimes a Motive, to add something to the layer of sub, because obviously it's just a raw sub bass. With this sub bass, I've actually drawn for Padshop. So Padshop 2. So Padshop 2, I have this, Padshop 2 is amazing. Again, we have amazing videos on our channel about how to use it. You know, granular synthesis, you can have 2 sounds mixed together. It has a full effect suite in there. It also has an arpeggiator, which you can customize. It's great. More importantly, you can actually import your own waveforms as well. And obviously we have our packs, expansion packs as well. We have Polarities, Bewitcher, Elysium. We have Dom's Apollo there. Big shout out to Dom on his pack. So you can see there, it's capable of anything. Synths, FM, organs, brass strings, but also bass. It's great for bass as well. So I've added a bass sort of lead type over this. It's called Bamboo Ukulele. I hope I said that right. Bamboo Ukulele. And this is what it sounds like. And that's exactly what I want it to do. I want it to have no bass, but also impart the mid-range and the sort of high frequency ranges to sit on top of the sub bass. And when you listen to them together, they sound like this. So they really fit really well together. So let's have a look at this channel, and there's quite a bit on here because obviously I'm trying to really make it gel with the sub, and I don't want something to be more empowering than the other, and I don't really want a side chain because I didn't really do it back then, so it's the same concept. I want it to just be compression and levels. And so here we have, let's start at the beginning. We've got frequency EQ. Obviously frequency EQ is amazing for cutting at extreme values and takes a lot of stuff out. I like to use it in conjunction with the channel equalizer, because then you get that sort of security and safety net of, yes, it's gone. Especially you don't want it in something like this where you don't want anything bleeding into, like a soft synth bleeding into a sub. So I've cut all that off there. So there's plenty of room now for the sub. It's going into distortion, so this has been in there for a while. A great plugin. This is like a jack of all trades. It needs some distortion. Right, there you go. I mean, obviously we could use Quadrafuzz, we could use Destroyer, things in the FX modulator, loads of other things, but distortion, it just does exactly what it's supposed to do. And it's great as well. You can actually do stuff like spatial in there, parallel processing, you can choose your tone and your feedback level, so it's a great plugin. Highly, highly recommended. That's going into Quadrafuzz. We discussed that on the sub bass. It's the same kind of concept, except that I've turned off, I've muted the low band, so it's not needed because we're not dealing with that. It's not even in there anyway, so there's no sub going on. We've taken out all the sub, and so that's a wasted processor lane. Here we've got the amplitude and the drive going for the region that we want, that sort of low mid region, and want to drive that through. So with and without. So you can see here, it's getting that sort of harmonics in there, about 1K onwards. And obviously adding a bit of volume as well, so because obviously it's amplitude, so it's amplitude and drive it's adding, and that's great. That's literally on a desk. You're literally going to turn up your gain meter. So here's my gain pot. I'm going to turn up my gain pot, and I'm going to turn up the level. And that's what you did on the desk. We drove the desks to give it an overdriven sound, and obviously the more you drive things in the analog realm, the more sort of harmonics it imparts, and that's what Quadrafuzz is emulating, like the Valve hardware distortion units, and it does it amazingly, amazingly well. So let's quickly check out distortion, because we didn't A and B that before. Is distortion with and without? Well, you know what it's doing. Great plugin. And again, they all work nicely in tandem. Coming across to our channel strip, we have some compression. Decent amount of ratio and threshold, because we really want to control the soft synth. So when you're using soft synths, virtual instruments and stuff like that, they can become overpowering in the mix sometimes, and this helps it, just keeps it all tame and in check. You don't want it fighting over the sub, and vice versa. You want them just in harmony together. Don't necessarily have to bust them together at all. You can still do it this way, and I kind of like doing it this way, to be honest. You can kind of control things at once and then see how they work together. So we have the comparison tool. I can choose sub bass channel, and a great thing is, like I say, you don't have to bust them together to see this. You can actually just choose to use our comparison tool. So in our comparison tool, Cubase sub bass channel, there's the Akai S950 channel, unmute it, Padshop channel, and I can see how they work together. Like that. And of course the 950 is way overpowering, and that's what we would want it to do. It's the bass, it is the sub bass, but everything else is kind of fitting quite nicely now. Because of that sculpting in that sort of frequency range, the distortion is fitting in the right place, and then you get that kind of gelled, cohesive bass sound. And that's how I would say is how you would process your jungle basses in Cubase. So that was chapter 2, how to create a bass. There's some really cool things in there I hope you picked up on. And to show you as well also that you can really get that sound within Cubase 12 Pro. We can get that sort of jungle sound, we can get that jungle sub sound, the jungle bass sound, with a few little tips and tricks there. So hopefully you found a lot of things useful there. Coming up next one, we've got mixing and mastering. That's what I do. Until then, peace!